Okay. Thanks, Thomas, for the pairing. So this is the pairing on the code suggestions review feature inside the new WebIDE. I'm Alper from the AI assisted team.
And I'm Thomas
yeah.
from the editor team.
Yes. Thomas, let me share my screen. I have a merge request, which I'm working on, and let me get your opinions there. So I will share. Now I'll move stuff to my smaller screen to make it maybe visible better.
I've got a very, very big screen, 32-inch. I can see everything.
Okay, so in the, when it's recorded, sometimes on YouTube, people don't see. And that was my problem with other pairings. Okay, so this is the status now, how things work. So what I have is there, I have the GitLab WebIDE. I'm on my new branch. I use that yarn start example, which is starting the example. Okay, one more thing I have is that I have to avoid course, I created a npm proxy for the API. Here I just proxy the calls to real API because we don't have a development environment. And I can also see the logs or what I can log here.
Okay, so this is a proxy for the code suggestion endpoint.
Yes, and also logs and helps debugging during the development. So let's come back here. So unfortunately, due to extreme caching, I prefer to work usually on the incognito mode. I know you suggested, several things, but look, stuff which first question then is that, I work, look at here, this is the incognito mode. This is my local GDK, okay? Unless I do that.
Sorry to interrupt you. The best way I find to work with the example app, which does have a unpleasant caching, is to have the network tab open in your developer tools and just check there. There is somewhere in the network tab there is a disable, like in this disable cache. That's the one, and then the developer tools need to be open for the cache to be disabled. Like that's the
okay.
Yeah, that's the trick. If they are closed, then they are not affecting the website. So
okay,
this actually needs to be open, and then there should, like, after checking this checkbox, that I've never had an issue with caching anymore.
Awesome. That was my main problem. Okay, let me then do that, and let me move the screen elsewhere. So let's try here. Okay. So it means now, let me refresh. Okay, I have a local GDK environment. I have a local project. I use a local token here. Okay. I start.
And you do have the developer tools open, or?
Yes, on my left screen I have it open.
Okay.
Yeah,
right.
I'm putting it in the second screen. So that so let's come here. Let's start. One thing which Katie was asking for design is how to put a walkthrough here. So we have a walkthrough section which only has a title and can have some links and an image here. That's all. So that's not dependent on the extension. So we can put it even if you don't have an extension. We can link to a GitLab issue or some section which makes sense. So that's something which I told to Katie today. Let's come back to the code suggestions. So when I come there, sphere, yes, my meeting which never works. Okay. See, when I do that, I get some suggestions. And things are great. Yesterday I had some problems and I was able to debug them here. So that proxy project is under my name. I will push it as part of the merge request. For the time being, that's the only way to debug the calls if someone needs to debug the calls. So
Gotcha.
we get a prompt call, which is the area of sphere, and it returns a completion. That's how it works. Okay, so that's all for now. So things work basically, but we have some challenges. Let me ask you the first question here. Okay, I'll open the MR merge request and okay, the first thing is I'll collapse my bars. The first thing is how should we really test this functionality? You know, if you look at here, we have a okay. Let's try to move here. We have a packages WebIDE assisted code, AI assisted code suggestions folder, which is an extension. Okay.
Yeah.
And then okay, we have the make file, which doesn't matter here. We have also some bootstrapping code inside the packages VS Code bootstrap, where we add that extension. So when we come here to that, you know, to my new code, let me open here the GitLab actually UI. That's the code which I'm now building. What could be the best way to test this? And let me give you the example of the desktop edition, how it was tested there. I think you remember that was tested by, okay, that's here. So we have here the same, you know, completion. Okay. We have a unit test around here, which basically checks that it parses the configuration.
Yeah.
But also we had an integration test here,
which is now disabled.
Yeah. Which we have this AI test, some fixtures and some infrastructure code.
Yeah, and if you scroll to the it pod somewhere in the middle, yeah, it's disabled now because we didn't have a good way to hook into the events in the VS Code, and so we were setting there the timeout that's on line 62, and that was just failing regularly in CI. So yeah. So to answer your question, I don't know about the end-to-end test. Like we don't have a good way to do that with the WebIDE itself, like to test. We are putting just unit tests everywhere and testing as much of the logic as we can, but we don't have any end-to-end test or like a large integration test that would check that the VS Code got initialized properly, and then you can click on files, open them, commit them. We don't have that yet.
Okay, so I had a look at something which is similar. Then we have to go with unit tests right now. Anyway, the integration test is disabled there. So we have the test utils in every package, more or less. And then we have a test file for most functionality, right?
Yes.
And it's in TypeScript this time. The integration tests were in JavaScript.
In the extension, the reason for the tests being in JavaScript and not TypeScript is because they had to be in sign-in, because long story short, Jest has its own runtime environment, but the integration tests for the extension need to run inside VS Code. And so we couldn't have reused the just runtime environment, and we need to have a test runner that can run inside of VS Code, which is sign-in. And for that reason, we used JavaScript for the test. That's not our issue here because we are testing everything in isolation. So it makes sense to use Jest and make it TypeScript.
Okay. So coming back to here, what is the test utils folder, which is in several folders? I have seen that.
What is it, you mean? It's like from what I saw there, it was something that was pretending to be VS Code because we don't have the runtime VS Code available. So like when you see creating quick pick and whatnot, that's here, I don't know. I didn't work on the file system, but when I see create VS Code quick pick, that just seems like when we want to simulate VS Code doing something, we use the test utils for it.
Okay. Okay, so that's one, for example. Okay, and then each file usually have their own tests, right? That's how it works. Okay, so we'll go the same way. I will not have integration tests for the time being, which is okay. When we have it, I think we'll think about it. Okay, that was the first question. Thanks. Anything else you want to say about testing?
Yeah, it's nothing specific. Like in general, it's just really good to try to isolate your logic from VS Code as much as possible. And that way it's easier to unit test and you don't have to mock as much of the VS Code API, extension API. But that's just a general. You
mean during the implementation, isolate as much as possible, right?
Yeah, like by that I mean, ideally you would have a shell where you are calling the quick picks and VS Code, other VS Code APIs, and then you would have a class or a function that implements the core of your logic, and that you are not calling VS Code dot something from within that class. If you can help it. Sometimes you can't, because the core of the class is about calling some VS Code functions. But if you can help it, like it's better to isolate the logic away from the VS Code runtime dependency. It just makes for clearer tests.
Yeah, thanks. Okay, let's go down to the second topic. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm searching for a way to look. So how this extension works is that there's a setting called is built-in true, but even if I set it to false, in the VS Code package JSON for that extension, that's always true. So if I really want to go to that extension, I go to Builtin, and I go here to, for example, extension settings. That means, that was a discussion with our designer, Katie. It means that that section is not easily discoverable by users, because anyway, it's a built-in extension. It's not meant to be, available for people to configure or have a look. Okay.
Correct.
So that means whatever we want to do, we have to do elsewhere, or if it's built in, for example, that one. And in, let's say, in that particular VS Code project, if the user wants to, the admin wants to enable, they will enable it as part of this project anyway. And if they really work on that, they are going to work here, and they can get feedback there. However, when they come here, the extension will be enabled at some point by default in the future, so that we shall not tell the user never to go here to built-in extensions and do something. And if we need to, and if we give the user a way to disable it, it's going to be somewhere else. But that's not a question to you. That's a design issue, something which I wanted to point out. My bigger issue here is
just regarding this. It's always possible to like disable and enable extensions programmatic. To change the settings programmatically, or to show users the settings screen programmatically. So like we could put a button anywhere saying like show me the settings. That is something that we can do. Doesn't have to, like, if the worry is about accessing the extension settings, we have different ways than going there from this context.
So literally, yeah, for example, here we can go to that extension setting programmatically. Yeah. That's what you mean, right?
Yeah, I mean, like this, whatever this button does, we could programmatically, I'm almost certain we could programmatically reproduce, like somewhere from code, we could show open extension settings for this extension.
Okay. Thanks for that. So one second. Sorry.
No problem.
So the next topic is really, that was our discussion with you. During the development, I will have 2 more engineers work on that. So we shall have something like at least 10 issues to build iteratively, or 15, which may mean over 20 MRs in the next 2 months. So you had a great idea that we start disabled for this extension. I searched through the VS code base. Somehow I could not find a way to start that disabled easily anywhere, non-programmatic.
Okay.
So
what happens? And the link that I was sending, that there is the option with --disable extension that you can give as a runtime parameter to the code executable. How did you go with tracing that to whatever?
That went there to, so I think somewhere at the root of the VS Code WebIDE.
Yeah.
If you do you push that to this VS Code, is that for the development of that project, or is it something we built?
This is settings for developing the VS Code WebIDE. So those settings are meant for when you open this project in your VS Code to make it easier for you to work with it. That's not gonna go into production or anything like that.
Okay, so somehow people ask for a VS Code settings folder to give them the power to disable certain extensions. It's probably possible programmatically because of the code suggestions you said. So if you go to VS Code source code, if you go there and search for disable extension,
I think it's, yeah.
So we have that argument. And then we have a lot of functions on related to disabled extensions. Let's say.
I was kind of wondering where the argument goes. So when you set that argument disable extension, that only affects the runtime. It doesn't change anything on your hard drive, I would assume, because if you run it next time, I would think that it only affects the session where you set this argument, not the subsequent sessions. We can try that, but I'm pretty sure that that's what's happening. And so I would be tracking what part of the VS Code runtime gets changed by this disabled extension setting.
So you mean that so we do it programmatically, that's what you mean, right? So we discover how that works, and then somewhere in our WebIDE, we do the same by calling disable extension for our own WebIDE, right?
Possibly, or when you have the, when we are bootstrapping the VS Code in the GitLab Web IDE, there is the VS bootstrap package. I can't remember exactly the name. Not in the extension, but in the Web IDE. Yeah, here. So in packages, there is a bootstrap and there would be main. Yeah, and a source main. There is if you scroll a little bit down, you would see this like a little bit further.
Yeah.
Yeah, like here where you have the config and you are, is that the config? No, that was somewhere, maybe it's a different file. We had a huge list of parameters like editor, and I would have to have a look where it is, but there is a list of parameters that we are initializing the VS Code with. It's like settings, but not settings, but initial. That's the one.
Yeah.
That big object there. Yeah, this one. So settings, things, option, on line 44 and stuff like that. So I would not assume, but I would hope that maybe the disable extension makes its way to the parameters here.
Yeah, so it might be. It was what I was searching for. So because people have a file called VS Code, actually, where they asked for someone. Okay, I will check here. So if I can put the name here, I assume it's going to get disabled here.
Yeah, that's why I was thinking following the setting, the command line setting could help us find out what part of VS Code is responsible for disabling the extension and see what other ways of contributing to that list of disabled extensions we can use.
Sorry for Emacs.
That's okay. I've never seen working someone with Emacs. There is plenty of Vim people, but
I use both at the same time. So let's try to change now. For example, let's go start yes.
But we would need to find out what's the name of the.
Yeah, it's disabled extensions. I just found out and I played a lot in different ways. So I will try
all of these. Yeah, I have no idea whether that's actually gonna work. Like, can you maybe check out what's the, and it wouldn't be in product configuration probably, right? It would be like one level above, but we need to check what the type is in the VS Code. Do you want me to drive for a bit?
Yeah, I will stop and insert.
Okay.
No, I mean, I played with the disabled extensions array or Boolean globally or array one by one a lot, but I couldn't figure out, but I played in the settings section.
Okay. So we can go to the fork and here, what is it? Server parsed args. Is there a disable extension here? No, so it's not, the server doesn't get that, but disable extension. Is it disable extension? No. Am I making?
It was I mean, there are multiple versions like disable dash
extensions.
Or disabled extension.
I see. All right, here we go. So here, that's the options that we were looking for. And if I'll have a look, extension string. Okay, and that's still the arguments. I wonder what type will get a disable extensions. I'm trying to figure out where are we using that argument, and I would assume we are populating some internal interface with that. Target push, self, editor troubleshooting, environment service. that's it. All right, so environment service has disable extensions. It's either Boolean or string. That's what you were talking about, right?
Yeah. That's
Awesome. And what does, if I have a look at references, where is this used? Environment service, yes. Browser environment service. Okay, so if we have a browser environment service, what would that disabled extensions, environment service? So like I would expect now, I see that this is the extension management browser extension enablement service. And so this looks like it's running in a browser, and I wonder where but it looks like environment. Here we go. Browser environment service payload. What is this payload? No. I'm kind of just freestyling, trying to find how could we get that payload in there. Workspace provider payload. Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna change my strategy here, and I'm gonna open it in code. Might be easier to click through all the. So we are looking for the environment service. Environment service in maybe common. Is there something like disable? Yeah. How do we get the arguments? Okay, and that's part of constructor. So if we have the browser environment service, it should get the arguments in a constructor as well. Yeah, it doesn't even define constructor, so it gets the arguments. So now I would assume that we need to find out how the browser environment service gets its arguments. And maybe it is what you were working on with trying to set up the maybe the arguments come directly from that array from that object that we were passing in. I'll show you. I'll show it just. It would be that IDE. Do you remember exactly where was it? Was it the bootstrap main?
Start.ts under.
Right. So maybe these options that we pass in. I just want to pick up a very strange named property and full text search for it to find the type. How come I didn't copy it? Once again. Okay. To find the type, there is an interface somewhere. Yeah, this one that defines enabled extensions. And there is no disabled extensions, I assume. Yeah. So that our luck, I guess, ends there. This is the workbench construction options. And if we can't pass it to that, we can't. If it's not on this type, we can't pass it as these base options when we are initializing the WebIDE.
Yeah.
Remote authority, tunnel provider. So I'm really curious now where this, when we saw the native parsed args, where do they come from? Especially for the browser. Obviously on the desktop version, they come from the command line arguments. Maybe I can have a look for all usages of this constructor. And just stop me if like you feel that.
No, always great. Well, I did that for 4 hours. So let me. I mean, I was, I just find the environment service. Initially, I searched for just a simple way, like disabled equals true in the extension, but we didn't offer that.
Environment service in Node, Electron Sandbox.
Because that thing exactly will enable 3 engineers to work on different things independently.
Yeah. No,
Then I want to couple that exactly to call. If you make a call, and if I access the feature flags and I push them to VS Code using the client config, I want to then really have the feature flag control that thing which we do now. Like, so using the feature flag, we shall disable the extension. Maybe not load it. Sorry, maybe not disable, but we shall probably not load the extension at all.
Yeah. That's a good point. Like most of the things we would, like the problem with once the extension is running, then it loads the manifest in the package JSON, and so it will start showing its like components. And I don't think that there is a way around it. Like there is plenty of places where you don't have to specify them in manifest. Like for example, the status bar. That's something that you do at runtime, and you could just like have the extension running, but based on some feature flag, just not show some components. But in particular, the sidebar, it's not like optional. Once the extension says, I provide a sidebar with this icon, it does. And the only way how to remove it is to disable it or to hide it programmatically. Which that could actually be an option as well, to like if we absolutely fail at finding how to disable the extension at the startup, we might figure out whether there is any workarounds where we could just like hide the GitLab workflow, or like hide the icon, because as far as I can tell, this is the only UI part that shows, regardless of whether you do like in the extension activation method, you can affect a lot of things, but you can't say whether this is going to show or not. That's going to show by default, but maybe you can hide it programmatically. That would be another thing, how to make the code completion extension not visible until it's ready. But let's explore for a little bit longer whether we can find out a way to make it disabled. So we've got this. It's essentially that when we look for the references, it's not really user profile surveys, file user data provider. Yeah, that's not what I was looking for. Something need to call the environment service. Let's have a look what are the usages of the browser. Environment service. It's not what I wanted to do. All references. Also, another option that I can think of would be temporarily changing the fork, the underlying VS Code build that we are using, to disable it. Like there would be one commit that we would revert eventually that would change the logic directly in the environment service. It wouldn't have to, like, we wouldn't have to do it as a part of the extension.
Just one question related, actually. Just let's go to the main TS where I'm loading the extension. Okay. If I can pass actually my feature flag, Paul pointed out to an client config where in GitLab I give certain parameters, they end up in the VS Code. If I can pass the feature flag, which we already have actually, we may then do we may not disable, but make the extension vanish by not loading it in main.ts.
Correct.
And
that
then
would be
we
possible.
can enable the extension in GDK, but what if we are not working on GDK and we are only working on VS Code WebIDE locally? In that case, can the developer modify the parameters coming from GitLab? Yes, I think, right? This screen form.
Yeah, you can. You would have to add another UI element into the form that you saw in the example. The one that asks you for the project and token and whatnot.
Yes.
You would have to add there something like feature flags or like a checkbox. Enable code completion, and based on that, the example app would pre-fill some data.
So what do you think about that approach? That way, no one will see, never. Only in development environment we shall see it for some time.
I like it. I think that's maybe better. Like what I was why I liked the approach of the disabled extension was that you can easily enable it with clicking and everywhere, like even in production without changing feature flag, you could enable it. But on the other hand, you just made me think that, if you are working on it day and night in the example app, like there is going to be 3 engineers working on it for a few months. Yeah. It's going to be better if you can just somewhere have the checkbox, like start with code completion, and the form remembers the checkbox. And then every time you are testing it.
Here, right?
So, yeah, there.
Yeah.
And then every time you are testing it, you don't have to go and click through several clicks to enable the extension. Once you start the example app, it would be already running. So that might be a better option.
Okay. Just a question there. If I want to do that, what I think is that I have to do that. So this is the, insert meta is where we set up the extension.
Yeah.
Okay. So I will use
conditionally.
Condition I will not add or extension. So that way I will, actually I was planning to use it in the future for feature flag too, when I have the issues. So that will enable me to everyone to really get rid of. So we shall not see the extension for like a couple of months until we are ready, right?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome.
I like it better than disabling the extension, especially since I failed.
There's no way. I search for, it's like the VS Code team is questioning the use case. They are right. So that's really exactly what we asked again and again. And finally the extension disablement is for end users really. They want to disable, enable, and you can do it with the command actually. But having a state of disabled or making it easier was not shown to be a good use case to VS Code developers by multiple issues in the VS Code GitHub, repository.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. So it was the other hard thing. So I will go that way. Let me continue then. We still have time.
Yes.
Ask more questions here. So this logo, I'm using GitLab logo, but I have to raise it with Katie, which logo we should show here, which doesn't matter, but if you come here, look, that one has GitLab logo too.
Yeah.
And if you don't have a logo, you have that white thing,
Yeah, I don't know, the GitLab logo is a good first choice for sure, especially since it's hidden in this built-in category. There is not that much of an issue with that particular logo, I'd say.
Yeah, users won't discover. So let's go back to our hardest topic then. Okay, so we had some chat there, you asked some questions, but API key. Okay, so what we need is that we were sending, in the VS Code desktop extension, we had a token and we were sending that particularly to our machine learning model gateway service, which is a Python or Go app, which then calls GitLab, and then GitLab has an API called, let me show that API. Okay, so we have a simple API called AI Assist here. So gitlab.com/v4 API v4 then AI Assist. Then with your token, we just checked if the user is allowed or not, true or false. That's it. Okay.
Yeah.
So now in the extension, so we wanted a seamless experience. So this token has no place. One thing which I was thinking was that, which actually Paul pointed out, is that so we shall be on a gitlab.com domain, and a code suggestions URL is also in the gitlab.com domain actually. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's code suggestions at gitlab.com. In that case, maybe the cookie. So we may call the API directly, and then cookie wise. Oh, it's
you can maybe check the mediator commands in the.
Yes, you mentioned them out. So tell me, these mediator commands, shall I use them even for calling the GitLab, the machine learning model gateway?
Anything that needs to be authenticated should be using the mediator commands.
You mean authenticated by gitlab.com, right?
Yes.
However, the mediator is not gitlab.com. And what does the mediator exactly do in that case?
The mediator is like, if you can I maybe share a screen, and I'm just gonna I'm gonna freestyle because I don't remember it word for word. It's been, I'm gonna share the screen. Yeah.
So
I don't remember it exactly.
API layer, right? For the GitLab API.
And not just that though. It's if I do Excalibur. Right. So if we have, this is the iframe. This is the VS Code. So we have the iframe, and I'll make it red. We are running a VS Code in the iframe as a additional layer of separating the VS Code from GitLab.
Yeah.
And now here we would have some kind of, and this is what I'm doing kind of from memory. So we will find the code exactly for it. But there is this a mediator, in a mediator VS Code. And then we would have a outer mediator. It's not called like that. We'll find the exact name, but the gist of it is that this is using the window.message communication between, I think it's a window.message, but don't quote me, and we'll find exactly the right API as well. So there is this only link that goes between the inside of the iframe and the outside of the iframe. This part, the outside of the iframe, has an access. This is running in a browser on gitlab.com, and this outer mediator has a full, it has the cookie. It can call any API or anything as you as authenticated GitLab user. and none of it gets inside of the iframe. So for example, when we are getting the WebIDE file tree, there is like a VS Code asks for give me all the files for the project. Then that message goes from the inner mediator. Again, it's not called like that. We'll find it to the outer mediator, and that makes the authenticated request, gets the list of all the files, and then returns it inside of the VS Code. So this is the part that has the authentication, and like it has access to your cookie and it's authenticated. This is the part that isn't. And so that's why I was suggesting that we'll have the mediator command. Now let's have a look at the WebIDE here and check out in the packages, where is the VS Code mediator commands. So I would assume that this is going to be the inner part. This is the part. This is compiled. Right. So this post message, it's okay. Window post message. It's the method, and that's how we communicate with the outside of the iframe. So these commands are happening like fetch raw. No, there's going to be there should be a command to get, what is it? Get file tree, I think. Project branch, command start remote. Maybe there is something like commit. Like let's follow the fetch raw file. So if I search for this throughout the whole project, somewhere in the extension, we would say we want a raw file, so we are executing this command. Then that gets to the mediator command here. No. Where was I? I'm a little bit confused now. Mediator. Okay, this is going to take me a short while. So when we are executing this command, okay, so this is the part where we are and the VS Code, this extension runs inside of a service worker or web worker. Can't remember the exact name. So it's an additional layer of isolation. It calls the execute command that tells VS Code to serve that command. Then I'm looking for where we are.
Where is the outer mediator here?
Yeah, that's so the outer mediator would be. Let's just find out. I'll have a look. It should be, I guess, fetch raw file. I'll find it. All right, this is Paul describing that. Maybe we can read through this. That's going to be better. So the VS Code commands package is responsible for writing sort of commands needed by the extension that have to run outside of the VS Code sandbox. The WebIDE has three main environments: main, the WebIDE package. All right, so I would assume that it might be in the WebIDE package. I'm just gonna keep this handy and go back to it if I won't be able to find in the WebIDE package. Here we go. VS Code tracking, close error. Handle start remote, handle close, handle tracking. I was expecting it to be somewhere here. Handle message. but it's not. I want to find a way where the part where we are invoking the API.
Okay.
Post message GitLab API client. Okay, GitLab API client. Do we have that here as a?
Yeah, we have it somewhere. Yeah, up.
Okay, so let's search where it's imported. Client commit. Okay, so I would assume that the VS Code Mediator commands are outside of the, like they are the outer mediator, as I called it.
Yeah.
Patch raw file. And so now if we see, where is this used? What have I done? No, find all references. Here we go. All right, so this is where we are, I guess, handling create commands. All right, so here we are starting client only, starting a workbench, and with commands, we are giving it these create commands. And this is happening outside of this is still outside of the iframe, right?
Yeah.
The VS Code bootstrap. And then when we are calling the start workbench, or is it inside already? This might be already inside. Ooh, I'm super confused at the moment. I got entangled in it.
Yeah,
but like the logic is like I would follow it from the API client. So the API client is definitely on the outside. It's calling the authenticate, like on GitLab.com, the API client is already authenticated. And so it needs to be outside of the iframe. And then I would just follow what commands we are, like, how are we calling that command to get to the API client?
Yeah. We can take it offline if you wish, because this. Anyway, I think I will not call here exactly because, you know, when I build when user opens the WebIDE, initially I will check if the user can really open it, is allowed to open it, open with code suggestions. Then I have to disable it in the client config upfront. And the calls I make now to the code suggestions model gateway, which is the Python API there, requires that backend has to authenticate also, even if I authenticate here. So in short, I think probably since WebID is under our control, the model gateway authentication is enough for us, plus to check at the beginning of the session whenever a user starts a new WebID, where I check if the user is allowed or not. So, so probably I will not call the mediator commands for the time being, but in the future I might need to get.
Oh, sorry. And how do you get any credentials then? Like it's not authenticated. The whole the gateway that you are talking about, it's not.
Very good question. So I think yes. Then so we shall devise a new authenticator. Probably in the mediator we shall add something new called code suggestions credentials, which can be, this is just one idea, which can be time-based web tokens, JSON web tokens. That way, then I will call in the GitLab client API here in the Mediator. I will add that API in GitLab and here. And when I add them, yes, I will need that. So in short, I mean, in the future, I will need that. And then that call inside the WebIDE, that call by the user, we give a short-lived token, which is not the typical GitLab token, but a GitLab, a JWT time-based token for 1 hour.
Yeah.
We go now to the machine learning backend. That's the current plan we are thinking, because we did something similar. And yes, then we will use the Mediator plus the GitLab client plus the GitLab API to fetch a short-lived token for code suggestions.
Okay. I understand. I think it would be so good to like draw it. I like the idea was that everything that's authenticated will live outside of the VS Code runtime.
Yes.
So like getting a token and injecting it inside of the VS Code extension is like going against that idea, because then you have a credentials running in a VS Code extension. And I'm not saying that it's necessarily bad, but it's something that you should run by Paul, because I think Paul devised this like separation of concerns.
I see. So in that case, you mean even the call to the machine learning model gateway should take place
would be
outside.
Mediated. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, you're right. Thanks a lot.
So like instead of you would have instead of injecting the token inside, from within the extension, like from within VS Code, you would only have a Mediator command saying, give me code completion with these and these arguments, and everything.
I think it makes sense. And I think we will not overload any server or something. It will just happen in the browser outside, in the outside Mediator layer, which you were mentioning, right? So that will make the call to code suggestions on the browser.
Yeah, exactly. And there is no, like, as far as we were able to observe, there's no performance hit by having it communicate outside of the iframe.
Awesome. Okay, then I will start with code in disabled form, not disabled, but vanished form, and then I will open all the issues there. We have like 5-10 issues to also improve the authentication, and each will come with small MRs. Also, I applied to be a reviewer in the GitLab WebIDE, so that will help us to learn, as you, I think, talked to David. That was also in our discussion. So
awesome.
That will help us learn a bit more about WebIDE.
Yeah. As we saw just then, I should learn more about WebIDE as well. I got really entangled in the Mediator commands, and maybe when you are working on it, we could pair on it. At least I would relearn that part, and maybe we can make it a little bit more like user friendly, to a little bit more understandable. But up to you. That's definitely after you solve the conditional loading of the extension.
Let me solve the condition loading, then I can load there something unfinished, so that we can really add there 20 new MRs. Yeah.
Awesome.
Okay. Thanks a lot, Thomas.
All right. You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.